A man worked 2 years abroad, saved every dollar, and came home with flowers in his hand and a ring box in his pocket, ready to give his wife the life he had promised her. He did not know she was already pregnant. He did not know the father was his own cousin. He did not know she had been quietly pulling money from his savings account for 18 months, and he did not know that the sweet elderly woman next door had written down every single thing she witnessed, every late night, every parked car, every whispered conversation through the fence, in a small spiral notebook that was about to change everything. This is the story of Cedric Lawson, a man who loved too completely, trusted too fully, and almost lost everything because of it. A man who sat in his own driveway holding wilting roses and had no idea that the truth, all of it, was less than 48 hours away from coming out in the most devastating way possible. Stay with me, because this story is going to make you cry, make you angry, and in the end, make you stand up and cheer. If you have ever loved someone who did not deserve it, this one is for you. Before we go any further, if this is your first time here, welcome. This channel is a place for real stories, deep emotions, and the kind of truth that reminds us who we are. If you have been here before, you already know what we do. We sit down together and we tell the whole story, no shortcuts, no sugarcoating. Drop a comment right now and tell me where you are watching from and what time it is where you are. I want to know who is in this room with me tonight. And if nobody has told you yet today, you matter and you are right on time. Now hit that subscribe button so you never miss a story like this one. Because this one right here is going to stay with you. Now, let us go back to the beginning. Atlanta, Georgia, late September. The kind of evening where the air finally starts to let go of the summer heat, where the trees along the residential streets hold just enough gold in their leaves to make the whole neighborhood look like something worth fighting for. Cedric Lawson had grown up 3 miles from this street. He had played basketball in the park at the end of the block when he was 12 years old. He had walked these sidewalks with his mother, Ruth Ann, on Sunday mornings, her hand wrapped around her church hat, sitting perfectly straight on her head. This neighborhood was not fancy. The houses were modest brick fronts, small yards, chain-link fences in some places. But to Cedric, it was the most beautiful kind of place in the world. It was the kind of place where people knew your name. The kind of place where somebody's grandmother was always on the porch. Literally. Miss Opal had lived in the yellow house next door for 31 years. She was 73 years old, a retired obstetrics nurse with sharp brown eyes and a memory that worked better than most people's phone cameras. She kept a small garden by her front steps, marigolds mostly, and she sat on her porch every evening from around 5 o'clock until the fireflies came out. She noticed everything. She always had. It was a professional habit she had never been able to shake even in retirement. When you spent 30 years watching for things that other people missed, you did not just turn that off. She had watched Cedric grow from a teenager into a man. She had attended his wedding 6 years ago, sitting in the 4th pew in her good lavender dress. She had waved him off 2 years ago when he left for Germany, standing on that porch, with her hand raised, watching his car pull away from the curb. She had watched what happened after that too. But we will get to Miss Opal in time. Cedric Jerome Lawson was 34 years old, 6 feet 1 inch tall, 188 pounds of quiet determination. He was a structural engineer, the kind of man who could look at a building and understand in his bones what was holding it up and what might make it fall. He had a broad, open face, the kind that made strangers feel like they could trust him immediately, and he carried himself with the particular steadiness of a man who had decided early in life that he was going to be everything his own father had not been. His father had left when Cedric was 6. No warning, no explanation. Just an empty chair at the breakfast table one Tuesday morning, and his mother's face very still, very careful, as she poured orange juice like nothing had happened. Cedric never forgot that face. He promised himself at an age when most boys were still figuring out how to tie their shoes properly, that he would never make a woman he loved look like that. He would stay. He would work. He would build something real. He met Simone Hargrove at a church fundraiser when he was 26 years old. She was standing near the dessert table in a yellow dress, laughing at something her friend had said. And when she laughed, the whole room seemed to tilt slightly in her direction. Cedric stood there for a full 30 seconds before he could make himself walk over. She was 24. She was studying communications at a local college. She had a smile that made you feel like you were the most interesting person she had ever met, and she aimed that smile at Cedric like a warm light. He never had a chance. They dated for 18 months. They married on a Saturday in June outdoors, under a white tent, with Ruth Ann crying in the front row, and Cedric's cousin Darius standing in the back in his groomsman tuxedo raising a glass during the toast. To Cedric and Simone, Darius had said, grinning broadly, "May you always give each other exactly what you deserve." Nobody thought anything of that toast at the time. It had sounded like a blessing. Cedric thought about those words sometimes now. They landed differently. 2 years ago, Cedric's firm had offered him a placement at a partnering company in Stuttgart, Germany. 26 months of contract work at a salary nearly double what he made in Atlanta. It was not an easy decision. He and Simone had only been married 4 years. They had talked about children, about buying a home, about building the kind of life that required real money and real patience. Go, Simone had told him. She had held both his hands at the kitchen table, looking straight at him. "We are building something, baby. Go build it." At the airport, she had cried. He had held her for a long time at the security line, his chin on top of her head, memorizing the way she smelled. He almost turned back twice. He did not turn back. For 26 months, he worked. He saved. He sent money home every month for their shared expenses and kept the rest in a personal savings account he had opened specifically for the dream, the down payment on a house. Their house. A real one with a yard and a driveway and a room ready to become a nursery the moment they were ready. By the time his contract ended, he had saved $42,000. He bought Simone a pair of sapphire earrings in Stuttgart deep blue, set in white gold, the color of the dress she had worn on their first real date. He bought roses at the airport shop. He had a speech prepared. He had been home less than 3 hours when Simone sat across from him at the kitchen table, folded her hands very carefully in front of her, and said the 4 words that cracked something open in his chest. "I want a baby. Now." Cedric set his coffee cup down slowly. He looked at his wife across the kitchen table. Her hands folded, her chin, lifted, her eyes steady and waiting, and he tried to find the right words to respond to the urgency in her voice. Not the idea itself. He wanted children. He had always wanted children, but something about the way she said it now sat in his chest at the wrong angle, like a splinter too small to see, but impossible to ignore. "Simone." He kept his voice gentle. "Baby, I just got home. I landed 12 hours ago." "I know when you landed, Cedric. I'm just saying, can we breathe for a minute? We have time." Simone's jaw shifted slightly. A small movement, the kind most people would miss entirely. Cedric had spent 6 years learning her face, and he caught it, filed it somewhere in the back of his mind, without fully understanding yet why it mattered. "We are not as young as we used to be," she said. "I have been waiting 2 years. I am ready now." "I hear you," Cedric said carefully. "I want that too. I just..." I thought we said we would get settled first. Find the house, get the down payment sorted, then. I already made an appointment. He stopped. What kind of appointment? A fertility consultation. She said it smoothly, like it was the most natural thing in the world. At a clinic on Peachtree. Next Thursday at 2 in the afternoon. I need you there. Cedric looked at his wife for a long moment. The kitchen was quiet. Outside, a car passed slowly down the street. He could hear the hum of the refrigerator. When did you schedule that? He asked. Does it matter? I'm just asking Simone. Last week. She met his eyes directly. I wanted to be prepared. I wanted us to hit the ground running when you got back. She reached across the table and put her hand over his. Her fingers were warm. Her smile came up slow and easy the way it always had. I missed you, baby. I want us to start our family. Is that so wrong? He looked at her hand on top of his. He wanted to believe her. Every part of him that had spent 26 months sleeping alone in a Stuttgart apartment, looking at her photo on his nightstand, wanted to fold completely into that smile and let it be simple. No, he said quietly. That's not wrong. But the splinter was still there. Thursday came. They drove to the clinic together, Simone in the passenger seat, one hand resting on Cedric's arm the way she used to when they first started dating. The clinic was clean and modern, all soft lighting and neutral colors, the kind of place designed to make people feel calm about conversations that were anything but. The doctor, a composed woman named Dr. Anise Walcott, greeted them both warmly and began walking them through the initial consultation process. She was professional, unhurried, thorough. About 15 minutes in, she glanced at Simone's file and said in a tone that assumed everyone in the room already knew. And of course, since you came in for your preliminary screening 3 weeks ago, we already have your baseline numbers on file, so today we can focus primarily on... She stopped. Because Cedric had gone very still. Dr. Walcott looked between them once briefly and recalibrated with the smooth professionalism of someone who had accidentally stepped into a private conversation before. Let me just pull up the full chart, she said, and excused herself from the room. Cedric did not look at Simone right away. He looked at the poster on the wall, a diagram of something medical that he did not process at all. He kept his breathing even. You came here 3 weeks ago, he said. Flat. Not a question. It was just a preliminary thing, Simone said quickly. Basic blood work. I wanted to be proactive. You didn't mention it. I didn't want to make a big deal out of it, Cedric. I was trying to make things easier for when you got back. He nodded slowly. He did not say anything else. Dr. Walcott returned, and the appointment continued, and Cedric answered questions when he was supposed to, and smiled when he was supposed to, and drove them home afterward without raising his voice once. But that evening, while Simone was in the shower, he sat at the kitchen table and opened his laptop. The folder was still on the counter where Simone had left it, the family planning agreement. She had mentioned it again that morning over breakfast, casual sliding it toward him with a pen already beside it. Just whenever you get a chance, babe. No rush. He opened it. He read slowly. Page 1 was standard. Page 2 was standard. Page 3 was a lot of language about shared intentions and mutual commitment to family planning, which still sounded like something a real document might say. Page 4 stopped him cold. The language was buried in the third paragraph tucked between 2 sentences about joint parental responsibilities and the sanctity of the marital bond. It read, Both parties hereby agree to accept full financial and legal responsibility For any child conceived during the duration of this marriage, regardless of the circumstances of conception, effective upon the date of signing. Regardless of the circumstances of conception. Cedric read it 3 times. Then he took his phone and photographed every single page. He called his lawyer friend Wendell that night from the back porch, speaking low, watching the kitchen window. Wendell listened without interrupting. When Cedric finished, there was a brief silence on the line. "Do not sign that," Wendell said. "Not one word. Not your initials on the corner. Nothing." It came from the clinic. "Cedric." Wendell's voice was careful and serious. "That language is not standard clinic paperwork. Somebody added that. That clause would make you legally and financially responsible for a child that may not be yours. I need you to hear me right now. Do not sign that document." Cedric stood on his back porch in the dark, the Atlanta night warm and still around him, and felt something inside him shift permanently. He called his mother next. Ruth Ann picked up on the second ring the way she always did. "Hey, baby," she said. "How does it feel to be home?" Cedric opened his mouth, closed it, then said, "Mama, something doesn't feel right." Ruth Ann was quiet for just a moment. Then carefully, "Talk to me." "What is she doing?" "What is she doing? Not what do you mean, or I'm sure it's nothing. Just what is she doing?" As if Ruth Ann had been waiting patient and watchful from 300 miles away for this exact phone call. "She wants me to sign something," Cedric said. "A legal document. She's calling it a family planning agreement." "Has she explained exactly what's in it?" "No." Another pause. Then Ruth Ann said quietly and firmly, "Don't sign anything, Cedric Jerome. Not until a lawyer has read every single word. You hear me? Yes, ma'am. And baby." Her voice softened just slightly. "Keep your eyes open. All the way open. Something has been sitting wrong with me about that woman for a long time. I didn't want to say it while you were so far away. But you're home now. So I'm saying it." Cedric stood in the dark for a long time after they hung up his phone, warm in his hand. Inside the house, he could hear Simone moving around the kitchen, humming softly to herself. He had heard that hum 1,000 times. It used to make him smile automatically the way a familiar song does. Now it made the splinter in his chest push deeper. He went back inside. He kissed her on the cheek. He told her he was tired from the travel and going to bed early. She smiled and said, "Of course, baby, rest up." She handed him a glass of water. She was so warm, so easy, so completely at peace. And Cedric thought she has been practicing this for a very long time. The next morning, Cedric woke up before the sun. He lay on his side of the bed for a long time, listening to Simone breathe beside him. Slow and even, completely undisturbed. He watched the ceiling lighten gradually as the sky outside shifted from black to gray to the pale gold of early Atlanta morning, and he made a decision. He was going to pay attention, quietly, carefully. The way he paid attention to a building looking for the small things first, the hairline fractures, the settling that happened below the surface before anything visible appeared. He was not going to confront her yet. He was not going to accuse her of anything he could not prove. He was a structural engineer. He understood that the worst thing you could do when you suspected a foundation was compromised was to push on it before you knew exactly what you were dealing with. He got up. He made coffee. He sat at the kitchen table with his laptop open and his phone beside it. He opened the joint bank account. He had not checked it since arriving home. He had his own personal savings account, the $42,000, which he kept entirely separate. But early in the marriage, he and Simone had opened a joint checking account for household expenses. His monthly transfers from Germany had gone there, Rent, utilities, groceries, the ordinary costs of keeping a life running while he was away. He had sent $2,000 a month without fail for 26 months. He scrolled back through the transaction history. The rent payments were there. The utility bills were there. Groceries, gas, the occasional larger purchase, all reasonable, all expected. And then there were the others. Small transfers. $40 here, $75 there. $120 on a Tuesday in February. $200 the following month, then back down to $60. They were irregular enough that no single one stood out. They went to an external account listed only as a routing number, no account name visible. The transfers began 18 months ago, almost exactly to the week. Cedric pulled out his phone and opened the calculator. He added them up slowly, line by line. $11,240. He set his phone down on the table. He picked up his coffee cup. He put it back down without drinking. $11,000. Gone in increments so small and so carefully spaced that a man who trusted his wife completely, a man who was 6,000 miles away and had no reason to look, would never notice. He had never noticed. His chest felt tight. Not the sharp tightness of anger, not yet. Something heavier. The particular weight of realizing that while you were sacrificing, while you were working 16-hour days in a foreign country and eating cheap food so you could save every possible dollar, someone was at home doing math of a very different kind. He closed the laptop. He went upstairs and looked in on Simone, still sleeping. Her hair was spread across the pillow. She looked peaceful, beautiful even. The way she had always looked beautiful, in that effortless way that had made him feel 6 years ago, like he had somehow gotten extraordinarily lucky. He went back downstairs and sat very still for a while. Then he started paying attention to other things. He had been home 4 days now, and he had been watching. Simone was nauseous in the mornings. Not dramatically, she was too controlled for that. But he noticed that she did not finish her coffee anymore, just held the cup and sipped once or twice, and then quietly set it aside. He noticed that she went to bed earlier than she used to. He noticed that at dinner 2 nights ago, when he had poured her a glass of red wine without thinking, she had picked it up, held it for a moment, and then said she had a headache, and set it back down untouched. He noticed all of it. He said nothing. On the 5th morning, he asked her directly. He waited until they were both at the table the way he always did when he needed to say something real. He kept his voice completely even. "Simone, are you already pregnant?" The reaction was immediate. Her head came up fast, her eyes sharp. "Why would you ask me that?" "I'm just asking." "No, Cedric." Her voice went up slightly, not loud, but pointed the way it got, when she wanted him to feel like he had done something wrong for asking a reasonable question. "That is not just asking. That is you accusing me of something. Do you not trust me?" "I didn't say anything about trust." "You implied it." She pushed back from the table, slightly crossing her arms. "I told you I want a baby. I made a doctor's appointment. I have been trying to plan for our future, and the first thing you do when you come home after 2 years is look at me like I am hiding something." Her eyes went wet. Quickly. Efficiently. "Do you know how much that hurts?" Cedric looked at her. He watched the tears. He watched the way her chin trembled just slightly, and he searched himself honestly the way he always had, the way a fair man does, asking himself if he was being unreasonable, if he was projecting, if he was letting Wendell's caution infect something that was still innocent. He could not tell. That was the most frightening part. He genuinely could not tell. "I'm sorry," he said. "I didn't mean to hurt you." She wiped her eyes. She reached across and touched his hand. I just want us to be on the same page, she said softly. That's all I've ever wanted. He nodded. He squeezed her hand back. And he thought about $11,240. That afternoon, while Simone was out, Cedric walked next door. Miss Opal was on her porch, the way she almost always was. At that hour, a glass of sweet tea on the small table beside her chair, and her hands folded in her lap. She looked up when she heard his footsteps on her front path, and her face did what it always did when she saw him. It opened warm and genuine the way a person's face opens for someone they have known since childhood. Cedric, baby. She smiled. Come sit with me. He sat in the other porch chair, the one that had always been there, the one he had sat in 100 times over the years. She poured him sweet tea without asking. He accepted it without asking. That was how it had always been between them. They talked for a while about ordinary things. His time in Germany, the weather, her marigolds which were holding on stubbornly into the fall. She asked about his mother, and he told her Ruth Ann was still singing in the choir, still making her famous sweet potato pie every Sunday. And then after a comfortable silence had settled between them, Cedric said quietly, Miss Opal, something doesn't feel right. She looked at him. Her sharp brown eyes were steady and calm, and full of something he could not quite read, a careful, patient sorrow, like a woman who had been carrying a weight and was finally being asked if she needed to set it down. I know, she said simply. He looked at her. What do you know? She was quiet for a moment. She looked out at the street, at the afternoon light on the pavement, at the marigolds nodding slightly in the small breeze. Then she turned back to him and said in a voice that was gentle and absolute, Cedric, baby, when you are ready to know the truth, everything, all of it, I will be right here. I am not going anywhere. He stared at her. His mouth opened slightly. Miss Opal. Not today, she said not unkindly. You are not ready today. I can see it in your face. You still want to find another explanation, and that is all right. She patted his hand once firmly the way his grandmother used to. But when there are no more other explanations, you come back. You hear me? Cedric drove home that afternoon in silence, Miss Opal's words sitting in his chest, like a stone dropped into still water, the ripples moving outward, slowly touching everything. He almost turned back twice on the short walk between her porch and his own front door. He didn't. But the truth was already moving toward him, steady and inevitable the way a structural failure moves quietly at first, then all at once. It came from a text message, not a confrontation, not a dramatic confession, not some carefully orchestrated moment where the truth arrived with warning. It came the way most devastating things come, sideways, ordinary, almost accidental. A Tuesday afternoon. Cedric was sitting at the kitchen table with his laptop open, reviewing engineering specs for a project his Atlanta firm had already begun talking to him about for his return. Simone was at what she said was a yoga class. The house was quiet. His phone buzzed. He glanced at it without thinking, the way you do when your hands are busy and your mind is elsewhere. It was a family group thread, the one that had existed for years, cousins, aunts, a few close family friends, the kind of thread that was mostly memes and birthday messages and the occasional heated debate about Thanksgiving side dishes. Cedric had been added back to it automatically when he returned and got a new domestic SIM card. The message was from Darius. Hey, sis-in-law. You good? Haven't heard from you since last week. Don't ghost me now. Cedric's hands stopped moving. He read it again, then a third time. Sis-in-law. Not Simone. Not her name. Sis-in-law. The easy, familiar shorthand of someone who had been talking to her regularly enough that the name felt unnecessary. The laughing emoji at the end. The casual assumption that she would see it and know immediately who it was from, and smile back in the same easy, familiar way. "Don't ghost me now." Cedric put his phone face down on the table. He stood up. He walked to the kitchen sink and turned on the cold water and put both hands under it, holding them there until the cold registered. Then he turned the water off and stood with his back against the counter and stared at the far wall of the kitchen for what might have been 2 minutes, or might have been 10. Then he picked up his phone, took a screenshot of the message, and saved it to a folder he created right then and titled simply, "Documents." Darius Marshall. Cedric's first cousin on his father's side, 35 years old. They had grown up attending the same family reunions, the same holiday dinners, the same church on Easter Sunday. As boys, they had played on the same little league team for 2 summers, and the coach had always put them in the same batting order because they were the same height and moved the same way, and it was easier than remembering which one was which. As men, they had grown apart in the particular quiet way that happens when 2 people take completely different roads. Cedric had gone to college on a partial scholarship, worked nights to cover the rest, graduated with an engineering degree and a plan. Darius had started things and not finished them a semester here. A business idea there, a charm that was genuinely remarkable, and that he had learned early in life could substitute in the short term for almost everything else. He was the kind of man who was magnetic at parties. The kind who always had a story, always had a drink in his hand, always made every room feel like it was glad he was there. The kind who smiled at Cedric's wedding with a raised glass and said, "May you always give each other exactly what you deserve." And everyone had laughed and clinked their glasses and thought it sounded like a blessing. Cedric remembered something now that he had filed away and forgotten years ago. A comment Darius had made at the engagement party, standing near the back of the room, talking to their cousin Terrell. Cedric had only caught a fragment as he passed. "Simone is something else, man. Cedric doesn't even know." And then someone had called Cedric's name, and he had turned away, and the sentence had never finished. He had not thought about that fragment in 6 years. He thought about it now. He did not call Darius. He did not respond to the message. He left it there in the thread, sitting unanswered, and he spent the next hour doing something methodical and difficult. He went back through every family photo he could find on his phone, his laptop, and the small printed album Simone kept on the living room shelf. Darius was everywhere. He was in the wedding photos, groomsman line 3rd from the left, smiling that broad, easy smile. He was in the Christmas photo from 4 years ago, the one taken at Ruth Ann's house, standing close to Simone near the fireplace. He was in a photo Simone had posted on her social media about 2 years ago, a group gathering at someone's backyard tagged with 3 other people's names. But Darius was there in the background, slightly out of focus, and Simone was turned slightly toward him in a way that meant nothing and meant everything. Cedric closed the album. He sat at the kitchen table, and the tears came, not the loud, broken kind, not the kind that announced themselves, the quiet kind. The kind that just fall while a man sits completely still and stares at nothing because his body has to do something with what his mind is being forced to understand, and there is no other available option. He did not make a sound. He just sat there while the afternoon light moved across the kitchen floor, and he let himself understand what he was understanding. His wife, his cousin, 2 years, possibly longer. The baby, he pressed the back of his hand against his mouth and held it there. He needed to know more before he could know what to do. He needed something outside his own head, a voice that had no stake in protecting his feelings, that would tell him what was real. He thought of Sister Beverly, a woman from his mother's church network who lived about 12 minutes from their neighborhood, The kind of community anchor who knew everything about everyone within a 3-mile radius simply because people talked to her and she listened and remembered. He had known her his whole life. She was not a gossip. She was the opposite of a gossip, actually. She held information quietly, the way a deep well holds water. He drove over without calling ahead. She answered the door in her housecoat, surprised but genuinely pleased to see him, and invited him in for coffee with the immediate, unconditional hospitality of a certain generation of black Southern women that made Cedric's throat tighten all over again. They talked for a while. He kept it casual, or tried to. He asked about the neighborhood, about mutual acquaintances, about whether she had seen much of the family lately, and then working his way to it sideways, he asked, "Sister Beverly, have you seen much of Darius around lately? I've been out of the country, so I feel like I've lost track of everybody." Sister Beverly smiled warmly and said without any hesitation at all, without any awareness of what her words were doing, to the man sitting across from her kitchen table, "Oh, Darius was coming around your neighborhood quite a lot while you were away, baby. I saw his car over there more than a few times. I figured Simone needed some help around the house, since you were gone so long. Wasn't that thoughtful of him?" The silence after that sentence lasted a long time. Sister Beverly kept smiling, reaching for the coffee pot to refill his cup, not understanding why his hand had gone so still on the table. "Yes," Cedric said after a moment. His voice was perfectly steady. "Wasn't it?" He drove home in silence. He pulled into the driveway. He sat in the car and looked at the front door of his house. Simone's yoga class would be ending soon. She would come home warm and loose-limbed, and she would kiss him on the cheek and ask what he wanted for dinner, and she would look completely at peace. He realized something sitting in that driveway that settled over him like cold water. She had been doing this for a long time, the calm, the warmth, the easy smile, the practiced tears. It was not accidental. It was not the peace of someone who had made a mistake and was trying to move forward. It was the peace of someone who believed completely and without doubt that she was never going to be caught. That was the most frightening thing he had ever understood about another person. Cedric gave himself one more day. He needed it not because he doubted what he knew, but because he was the kind of man who understood the difference between being certain and being ready. He was certain. He had been certain since the text message. But ready was something different. Ready meant he could sit across from her and speak the truth without his voice breaking, without his hands shaking, without giving her any opening to reframe what was happening as his failure instead of hers. He spent that day quietly. He called Wendell again and read him the clause from the family planning agreement one more time. Wendell told him what he already knew: do not sign it, photograph everything, and start keeping a record of dates and conversations. He transferred the photographs of the document to a secure cloud folder. He forwarded the screenshot of Darius's text to his own email. He checked the joint account one more time and wrote down the $11,240 in a small notebook he bought from the drugstore 3 blocks away and brought home in his coat pocket. He was methodical. He was quiet. He was absolutely heartbroken. That evening, he cooked dinner. He set the table properly, plates, napkins, glasses of water, the way they had always done on nights when they were trying to feel like a real family. Simone came downstairs in a soft green top, her hair down, and she smiled when she saw the table and said, "So, look at you." She sat across from him, and they ate, and she talked about a podcast she had been listening to, and he listened and nodded and answered when required, and the whole time he was watching her the way you watch a performance when you already know how the story ends. When the plates were cleared and the kitchen was quiet, he folded his hands on the table and looked at her directly. "Simone," he said, "how far along are you?" The silence that followed lasted exactly 3 seconds. He counted them. Her fork, which she had been carrying to the sink, stopped moving. Her back was to him. He watched her shoulders, the slight lift, the deliberate settling, the decision being made in real time about which direction to take this. She turned around. "What are you talking about?" Her voice was careful, neutral, buying time. "I think you know what I'm talking about. Cedric. You're not drinking coffee in the mornings. You put down the wine at dinner 2 nights ago without taking a sip. You've been sleeping 9 hours a night since I got home." He kept his voice even, completely even. "I'm a structural engineer, Simone. I look for patterns. I look for what things tell me when nobody's explaining them out loud. So I'll ask you again. How far along are you?" She set the fork down on the counter with a small, precise click. Then she turned fully to face him, and he watched something happen in her expression that he had never seen before in 6 years of marriage. The warmth drained out of it. Not slowly, quickly, efficiently, like a light being switched off. What remained was something cooler and more deliberate. The face underneath the face he had always known, and looking at it felt like stepping into a room in your own house and realizing you have never actually been inside it before. "Fine," she said. One word. Flat and final. "Fine," Cedric repeated. "Yes, I'm pregnant." She crossed her arms. "Are you happy now? Is that what you wanted to hear?" "How far along?" "A beat. 11 weeks. 11 weeks." Cedric had been home for 9 days. He did the math without moving, without blinking, without any visible reaction whatsoever. And the number landed in his chest, like a stone dropped from a great height. He reached into his shirt pocket and placed his phone on the table screen up with Darius's text message visible. Simone looked at it. The silence that followed was the loudest thing Cedric had ever heard. He watched her face go through 5 expressions in the space of 2 seconds: surprise, calculation, anger, something that briefly resembled shame, and then finally the thing that replaced all of it, a cold, settled clarity, like a door closing. "Where did you get that?" she said. "He sent it to the family group thread. Wrong number." Cedric's voice was absolutely steady. "He meant it for you." Simone said nothing. "Is it his?" Cedric asked. Another silence. Then, "It doesn't matter whose it is. It matters to me." "What matters?" Simone said, and now her voice had an edge to it that he had heard before in arguments, but never quite like this, never stripped of all pretense, never this bare and cold, "is what happens next. We are married. That is what is legally relevant here." "You were going to have me sign that document," Cedric said quietly. "You were going to make me legally responsible for a child that isn't mine before I even knew you were pregnant. I was trying to protect our family." "Stop." His voice for the first time had something hard in it. Not loud, just hard. The kind of hard that comes from a man who has finally reached the bottom of his patience and found bedrock. "Don't do that. Don't say that to me right now." Simone looked at him for a moment. Then she uncrossed her arms and sat down across from him. And the move was so casual, so comfortable, that it turned his stomach. "I needed stability, Cedric," she said. Her voice had shifted again, softer now, almost reasonable. "You were gone. You left me here alone for 2 years. I was building us a future. I didn't ask for a future in Germany." Her eyes were dry, completely dry. "I asked for a husband who was here, who showed up, who was present. You chose that contract over me. I chose it for us. You chose it for yourself." She said it simply, like a fact, like something she had rehearsed many times in a room alone, and finally felt comfortable saying out loud. "And I was lonely. and Darius was here. And I am not going to sit in front of you and perform guilt about that because you played your part in it too. Cedric stared at her. He had prepared himself for many versions of this conversation. He had imagined tears, denials, explosions of defensive anger. He had not imagined this, the complete absence of remorse, the calm redistribution of blame, the way she sat across from him in their kitchen, in her soft green top, and made his grief sound like a character flaw he ought to examine. "Simone," he said, "do you love me?" She looked at him. For a long moment she just looked at him, and in that moment, in the space between his question and her answer, he already knew. He had known for days, but he needed to hear it. He needed her to be the one to say it out loud. She didn't answer. That was its own answer. "I have a lawyer, Cedric," she said instead, her voice quiet and final. "If you don't sign that agreement, I will make this very expensive and very long and very difficult for you. I want you to think carefully about what that means." Cedric stood up. His chair scraped back from the table. The sound was loud in the quiet kitchen. He looked at his wife. This woman he had loved at 26 years old, at a church fundraiser. This woman he had held at an airport security line with his chin on top of her head. This woman he had sent money to every month for 26 months while sleeping alone in a foreign country, and he felt something in him go very quiet. Not numb, not broken, just quiet. The kind of quiet that comes after a very long, very loud noise finally stops. He walked out of the kitchen, down the hallway, out the front door. He didn't take his keys. He didn't take his wallet. The night air hit him, and he kept walking down the front path, down the sidewalk into the soft dark of the Atlanta evening. Because if he had stayed in that kitchen one more second with that woman, and her cold eyes, and her lawyer's threat, and her absolute absence of remorse, he was not sure what he might do. He walked for a long time, and when he finally stopped, he was standing in front of a yellow house with marigolds by the front steps, and the porch light was on, and Miss Opal was sitting in her chair like she had never moved at all, like she had been waiting. Miss Opal looked at him for a moment, at his empty hands, his open coat the particular way he was standing at the bottom of her porch steps, like a man who had walked somewhere without deciding to. And she said simply, "Sit down, baby. I've been waiting." Cedric climbed the 3 porch steps and sat in the chair beside hers. The night was warm and still. Somewhere down the street, a dog was barking at something patient and distant. The marigolds along the porch railing moved slightly in a small breeze and then went still again. Miss Opal did not ask him what happened. She did not ask him if he was all right. She understood the way certain people of a certain wisdom understand that some moments do not need to be approached from the outside. They need to be entered from within on the person's own terms in their own time. She reached beside her chair and picked up her sweet tea and took a slow sip. Cedric stared at the street. After a while he said, "She admitted it." "I know," Miss Opal said. "She's 11 weeks along." "I know that too." He turned to look at her then. Really look at her. And what he saw in her face was not surprise, not pity. It was something more serious than either of those things. It was the expression of a woman who had been carrying a specific weight for a specific amount of time and had finally been given permission to set it down. "Miss Opal," he said slowly, "what do you know?" She set her sweet tea down. She reached beside her chair again, and this time what she brought up was not a drink. It was a notebook. Small, spiral-bound, the kind you could buy at any drugstore. The cover was dark blue. She held it in both hands for a moment before she offered it to him, and the gesture had the weight of something significant, the weight of a decision that had been made carefully and deliberately and could not be unmade once it was made. I kept records, she said, from the beginning. I did not know what I was going to do with them. I only knew that what I was seeing was wrong and that somebody needed to be paying attention, so I paid attention. Cedric took the notebook. He opened it to the first page. Miss Opal's handwriting was small and precise. The handwriting of a woman who had spent 30 years writing patient notes and medication charts and the kinds of careful observations that other people's lives depended on getting exactly right. Each entry had a date at the top written in full. Below each date, a time, a brief description, and in some cases a note about weather or light conditions, the way a person writes when they want what they are recording to be unimpeachable. March 14th, 9:52 in the evening. Dark blue sedan, older model, parked in front of the house. Stayed overnight. Left at 6:17 the following morning. Occupant Darius Marshall confirmed by direct visual at 6:17 when he walked to his car. Cedric's jaw tightened. He turned the page. Another date, another entry. Darius Marshall. Parked 7:45 in the evening. Left the following morning at 7:02. He turned more pages. The entries continued, 14 of them across 18 months. Each one dated, each one timed, each one written in the same careful, steady hand. Some were single-sentence observations. Some were longer, noting details, the way Simone had come to the door in the porch light, the way she had looked up and down the street before opening it, the careful, practiced casualness of someone who had learned to make a private thing look ordinary. Cedric closed the notebook. He held it in both hands and looked at the street. "You documented all of this," he said. "I am a retired nurse," Miss Opal said simply. "Documentation is how I think. It is how I was trained. When something is wrong, you write it down. You write down what you see when you see it under what conditions. You do not editorialize. You do not interpret. You just record as accurately as you can what is actually there." She paused. "I did not want to get involved in your marriage, Cedric. That is not my place, and it never was. But I watched you grow up. I watched you work for everything you have. I watched you leave for Germany with your whole heart in your hands." Her voice stayed steady, but something moved through it, deep and quiet, like a current under still water. "I was not going to let them do this to you without somebody knowing the truth." Cedric looked at her for a long time. "There is more," she said. She picked up her phone from the small table beside her chair. A newer phone a grandchild had helped her set it up 2 years ago, and she had learned it thoroughly the way she learned everything, and she navigated to her photo gallery. 41 photographs, clear, taken from her porch in natural light or in the glow of the street lamp. Darius's car, Darius's face, dates embedded in the file metadata that matched the notebook entries exactly. Then she opened her voice memos. "This one," she said, "was an accident. I left my phone on the porch railing last July, a warm evening. I had gone inside to get my tea and forgot it out there. When I came back, it had recorded almost 4 minutes of audio from near the fence line." She looked at him steadily. "I want you to be prepared before you hear it." Cedric nodded once. She pressed play. The audio was slightly muffled, the ambient sound of a summer evening underneath it, cicadas and a distant car, but the voices were clear enough. Simone's voice, first low and warm the way it sounded when she was relaxed and unguarded. Then Darius, his laugh easy and familiar. The laugh Cedric had heard at every family gathering since childhood. "He'll come back like a puppy and sign whatever I put in front of him," Simone said. Darius laughed. "You sure Cedric's not that dumb?" A pause. Then Simone, and her voice in this moment was something Cedric had never heard before. Not warm, not performing, just flat and certain and utterly without feeling. He loves me too much to think straight. That's his whole problem. Another laugh from Darius. The sound of a screen door. Then silence. Miss Opal stopped the recording. The porch was very quiet. Cedric sat with his hands flat on his knees, his back straight, his eyes on the middle distance. He did not move. He did not speak. The street in front of them was empty, and still the street lamp casting a small yellow circle on the pavement, the marigolds perfectly motionless now, in the absence of any breeze. He was not crying. He had gone past the place where crying lived. He was in a quieter, colder place, the place a man arrives at when he has been given not just the confirmation of what he feared, but the full shape of it, the complete picture, every edge and corner visible at last, and there is nothing left to wonder about, and nothing left to hope was different. His wife's voice. He loves me too much to think straight. His cousin's laugh underneath it. $42,000 saved in a foreign country. Sapphire earrings in a box upstairs. Roses that had wilted on the passenger seat of his car. She never loved me, he said. It was not a question. Miss Opal was quiet for a moment. Then, I don't know what is in that woman's heart. I only know what I saw and what I heard. She paused. But I know what love looks like, Cedric. I was married for 41 years. I know what it looks like, and I know what it does not look like. And what I watched happen in that house while you were gone. She stopped. She shook her head once, slowly. That was not love. Cedric nodded. A small, final nod. He sat for another few minutes in the quiet. Then he took out his phone and called Wendell. Wendell answered on the second ring. I need to move, Cedric said. I have everything. A witness, a written record, photographs, and audio. I need to move now. Wendell was quiet for 1 second. Then, I'll meet you tomorrow morning at 8. Don't go back in that house tonight if you can help it. Stay somewhere else. I'll call my mother. Good. And Cedric. Wendell's voice was careful and serious. You did the right thing not signing that document. Whatever she has on her side, it is nothing compared to what you just described. You hear me? Yes, Cedric said. He ended the call. He looked at Miss Opal. Can I use your phone charger? Mine is inside. She was already standing to get it. He called Ruth Ann. She answered before the second ring was done, the way she always did, the way she had done his whole life, as if some part of her was always listening for him. Mama, he said, I need you to come to Atlanta. A brief silence. Then Ruth Ann said with a steadiness that told him she had been ready for this call. I am already packing, baby. I will be there by morning. He sat on Miss Opal's porch until midnight. She brought him a blanket when the air cooled. She did not make him talk. She just sat beside him in her chair, present and solid and real, the way certain people are real, not performing comfort, but simply providing it the way a good nurse provides it by staying. When he finally stood to leave, Wendell had arranged for him to stay at a hotel 3 miles away, paid for on Wendell's card. He turned to Miss Opal and looked at her for a moment without speaking. Then he said, Thank you. She waved one hand, dismissing the weight of it in the way that people do when they have done something at significant personal cost and do not want credit for it. You go get some sleep, she said. Tomorrow you start getting your life back. He walked down her porch steps and into the night. His phone buzzed once as he reached the sidewalk. A text from Simone. We need to talk tomorrow. Family dinner. My parents are coming over. Cedric stood under the street lamp and read it twice. Then he typed back one word. Perfect. The dinner was set for 6 o'clock on Saturday evening. Simone had arranged it with the confidence of a woman who believed she controlled the room. She had called her parents, Howard and Celestine Hargrove, and her sister Janelle, who drove up from Macon. She had, for reasons that revealed exactly how certain she was of her own position, also called Darius. Cedric found out later that she had told him to come early at 5:30 so they could coordinate before everyone else arrived. She had presented this gathering to Cedric as a family conversation, a chance to talk things through with people who loved them both. A united front. A controlled environment where the pressure of family presence would make Cedric more manageable, more likely to absorb rather than resist. What she did not know was that Cedric had called his mother. Ruth Ann Lawson arrived at 9:47 Saturday morning in her silver sedan, 312 miles from Birmingham, Alabama, her good coat on her reading glasses in her purse, and an expression on her face that Cedric recognized from childhood, the particular expression his mother wore when she had decided that something was going to be handled and she was the one who was going to handle it. She did not go to the house. She came directly to the hotel where Cedric was staying. She sat across from him at the small desk in his room, and he told her everything, the text message, the document, the money, the recording, the notebook, all of it. And she listened without interrupting, once her hands folded in her lap, her face very still and very careful. When he finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "I am going to that dinner." Cedric looked at her. "Mama, I am going to that dinner, Cedric Jerome, and you are not going to try to talk me out of it." Her voice was quiet and absolute. When that woman sat in my living room and ate my food and smiled at me for 6 years. She let me love her like a daughter. She let me pray for her by name. She stopped, breathed. "I am going to that dinner." Cedric nodded. He also called Wendell, who advised him carefully on exactly what he could and could not do, what could be presented, and how and what the legal implications were of playing a recorded audio in a private gathering. Wendell was thorough. He always was. "You're not in a courtroom," Wendell said. "You're in your own home with family. Play what you need to play. Just make sure you have already sent me copies of everything independently stored before you walk in that door." Cedric had sent them the night before. He was ready. At 5:45, Cedric pulled into his own driveway and sat in his car for a moment. Through the front window, he could see the warm light of the living room, the moving shapes of people already gathered. He could see Simone moving through the space, graceful, unhurried, the perfect hostess, the woman who made every room feel warmer just by walking in. He had believed that about her once with his whole heart. He got out of the car. He went inside. Darius was already there, standing near the kitchen doorway with a drink in his hand, wearing a blue button-down shirt, looking comfortable and easy the way he always looked. That particular looseness of a man who had never once in his life expected to be held accountable for anything. When he saw Cedric come through the front door, something moved across his face, quick, involuntary, gone in under a second, and then the broad smile came up like a curtain being raised. "Cuz," Darius said. "Good to see you, man. Welcome home." Cedric looked at him. It's Darius," he said simply. Nothing more. He moved through the room. He greeted Howard and Celestine Hargrove, Simone's parents, with genuine warmth. Howard was a quiet, dignified man in his mid-60s who worked in municipal government and took his reputation seriously. Celestine was small and sharp-eyed, the kind of woman who noticed everything but said only a fraction of what she observed. They both embraced Cedric and said how good it was to have him home, and Cedric thanked them and meant it because they had never done anything to him, and what was coming was not for them. Janelle, Simone's younger sister, hugged him at the door to the dining room. She was warmer than Simone always had been, less polished, more genuine, the kind of person who laughed too loudly at dinner and apologized for it, and then laughed again. She squeezed his arm and said, "We missed you, Cedric. For real." Ruth Ann arrived at 6 on the dot. Simone's face when she opened the door and found Ruth Ann standing on the porch in her good coat went through a rapid and involuntary sequence of reactions that Cedric watched carefully from across the room. Surprise, recalibration, and then the warm smile deployed smoothly, professionally. "Ruth Ann, what a lovely surprise. Please come in." "Thank you, baby," Ruth Ann said pleasantly, and walked inside, and the two women kissed cheeks, and nobody in the room could have detected anything wrong from the outside. But Cedric saw his mother's eyes find his across the room. He gave her a small nod. Dinner was extraordinary in its surface normality. Simone had cooked properly, roasted chicken rice, green beans, the kind of meal that said, "This is a family gathering, everything is fine. We are all adults here who love each other." Conversation moved around the table in its ordinary patterns. Howard talked about city council developments. Celestine asked Cedric about Germany. Janelle argued cheerfully with Darius about something inconsequential, and everyone laughed. Cedric ate. He answered questions. He passed dishes when asked. He refilled water glasses. He was the perfect guest at his own table. And Simone watched him from the other end with an expression that was almost approving, as if his composure confirmed her earlier assessment. As if his calm meant she had already won. When the plates were cleared, and the table held only glasses and the comfortable disorder of a finished meal, Cedric stood up. "Before we move to dessert," he said, "I have something I want to share with everyone." Simone's eyes sharpened, just slightly. He picked up his phone from beside his plate and walked calmly to the television at the far end of the living room, which was visible from the dining table. He connected his phone to the television via the cable that had always lived behind it, the one they used for movie nights. "Cedric," Simone's voice from the table. Warning. "Just a moment," he said pleasantly. He opened his voice memos. He found the file. He pressed play and turned the volume all the way up. The room filled with the sound of a summer evening. Cicadas, a distant car, and then two voices, clear and unmistakable, coming through the television speakers into the warm Saturday dinner air of the Lawson dining room. "He'll come back like a puppy and sign whatever I put in front of him." Celestine Hargrove put her fork down. "You sure Cedric's not that dumb?" Howard Hargrove went very still. "He loves me too much to think straight. That's his whole problem." The laugh. Easy, familiar, unmistakably Darius. Then silence on the recording, and silence in the room, and the two silences met each other and became something enormous. Simone moved. She was out of her chair and across the room in 3 seconds, reaching for the phone, reaching for the cable. "Turn it off. Cedric, turn it. Let it play," he said. He stepped back once, calmly out of her reach. "Let it play." She froze. Her hand was outstretched and there was nothing to grab, and the recording had already finished, and the room had already heard it, and there was no version of the next 30 seconds in which that became untrue. Cedric reached into his jacket pocket and placed the family planning agreement on the dining room table, all 4 pages flat, visible. Then he placed beside it a printed summary Wendell had prepared of the $11,240 in transfers from the joint account. "This document," he said, his voice steady and clear, "would have made me legally and financially responsible for a child that is not mine. She asked me to sign it the night I got home from 2 years abroad." He looked around the table. "And this is what she took from our joint account over the past 18 months. Celestine's hand went to her mouth. Janelle said very quietly, Simone, tell me that recording is not real." Simone stood in the middle of the room. She looked at her mother. She looked at her father. She looked at Janelle. She turned and looked at Darius, who was still sitting at the table, and something in her expression in that moment asked him silently and urgently to do something, to say something, to help. Darius stood up. He set his napkin on the table. He walked to the front door, opened it, and left. He did not say a single word. The door closed behind him with a quiet, ordinary click that was somehow the loudest sound in the room. Ruth Ann stood up from her chair. She was not a tall woman, but she had a quality of presence that made her seem taller than she was, and when she spoke, her voice was not raised, but it filled every corner of the room completely. "She was going to make my son raise another man's child," Ruth Ann said. "She was going to steal his money and trap him with a legal document and let him love that baby and call it his own. And that man," she did not point, did not gesture, just let the word hang in the air where Darius had been sitting. "That man sat at my son's wedding and stood in the photographs and shook his hand and called him family." Nobody spoke. The silence said everything. Simone looked around the table at her family, her mother's devastated face, her father's rigid stillness, her sister's eyes that were wet and wide and unable to look away, and she found not one face that was on her side, not one expression of support or sympathy, or even the willingness to hear her out. She had built this dinner as a room full of allies. She was standing in a room full of witnesses. And that was the moment Cedric watched it happen in real time, when Simone Hargrove Lawson finally fully understood what she had destroyed. The morning after the dinner, Cedric sat in Wendell's office at 8 o'clock sharp. The office was on the 14th floor of a building downtown, clean and spare, the kind of space that communicated competence without trying too hard. Wendell Carter was 41 years old, a family law attorney, who had grown up 3 blocks from Cedric and had spent his entire career being exactly as serious as his profession required. He had a way of delivering difficult information in a voice so calm and measured that it almost made the difficulty bearable. He spread the documents across his desk and looked at Cedric. "Here is where we are," Wendell said. "You have a recorded audio admission that your wife was planning to deceive you into accepting legal and financial responsibility for a child she knew was not yours. You have documented evidence of unauthorized transfers from a joint account totaling $11,240 over 18 months. You have a witness of 31 years, standing a retired medical professional, whose written records and photographic evidence establish a sustained pattern of deception throughout your absence. And you have a fraudulent document she attempted to have you sign under false pretenses." He paused. "Cedric, this is not a difficult case. This is one of the clearest cases of marital fraud I have seen in 17 years of practice." Cedric nodded. "What do we do first?" "We file today." The divorce petition was filed that same afternoon. The grounds cited were marital fraud, financial deception, and the attempted coercion of a legally binding document under false pretenses. Wendell moved quickly and precisely the way he always did, and the picture he painted for the court was clear and thoroughly documented at every point. Simone retained her own attorney, a woman named Patricia Odom, who had a reputation for aggressive representation and who arrived to the first hearing in a sharp gray suit with the particular energy of someone who intended to make this expensive and prolonged. She moved immediately to challenge the admissibility of the audio recording and to reframe the financial transfers as legitimate household expenses that Cedric had implicitly authorized. The judge, a measured woman named the Honorable Denise Abernathy, who had been on the family court bench for 19 years and had heard every variation of every story, listened to both sides. With the patience of someone who was not going to be hurried and was not going to be impressed by performance. Miss Opal was called as a witness. She arrived at the courthouse in her good dress, deep burgundy, the one she wore to church on special occasions, with her spiral notebook under her arm and her phone in her purse, and her 31 years of proximity to the situation as her sole qualification. She sat in the witness chair with the composed uprightness of a woman who had spent her career being the most reliable person in any room, and she answered every question put to her in the same careful, precise voice she used for everything. She presented the notebook. She presented the photographs with their embedded metadata. She presented the audio recording, which she explained in exact detail the date, the temperature that evening, the reason her phone had been left on the railing the moment she discovered the recording and understood what it contained. She described her decision to keep the evidence rather than delete it or bring it to Simone directly. "Why didn't you confront Mrs. Lawson yourself when you first suspected something was wrong?" Patricia Odom asked her on cross-examination. Miss Opal looked at her calmly. "Because it was not my marriage," she said. "My job was to observe and record accurately. It was not my place to act until the person who needed to know was ready to know it. That is also something I learned in nursing. You do not force information on a patient before they are ready to receive it. You wait for the right moment. Then you give them everything they need." The courtroom was very quiet after that. Judge Abernathy looked at Miss Opal for a moment, with an expression that was professionally neutral, but contained something that might in a different context have been called respect. The financial findings were addressed with equal clarity. The routing number attached to the unauthorized transfers was traced to a personal account, held solely in Simone's name, an account she had opened 14 months into Cedric's absence. The transfers were ruled unauthorized withdrawals from a joint account, executed without the knowledge or consent of the co-account holder. The full amount, $11,240, was ordered to be returned to Cedric within 60 days. The family planning agreement was examined by the court and ruled an attempted fraudulent instrument. Patricia Odom argued strenuously that it was a standard document available through the fertility clinic. The clinic, when contacted, confirmed that no such document existed in their materials and that they had never seen the specific language contained on page 4. Simone's face in the courtroom was controlled. She had learned composure early, and she wore it well. But there were moments when the clinic's statement was read aloud, when the full amount of the transfers was confirmed on the record, when the audio recording was played through the courtroom speakers for the second time, when her composure developed the hairline fractures of a structure under more weight than it was designed to bear. The paternity matter resolved itself with a brutal simplicity. Because Simone had admitted during proceedings that she was uncertain of the child's paternity, the court ordered a determination. The test confirmed what Cedric had already known: Darius Marshall was the biological father. The legal and financial responsibility that Simone had intended to transfer to Cedric was redirected entirely. Darius was notified formally. His attorney, a different attorney, hastily retained, attempted several angles of argument, and found none of them effective. Darius had a wife. Her name was Felicia, and they had been married for 7 years and had 2 daughters aged 9 and 6. Felicia Marshall found out about the paternity ruling the same day Darius did because his attorney sent the notification to their shared home address. She left within the week. She took the girls to her mother's house in Memphis, Tennessee, filed her own paperwork, and did not return. Cedric heard this through the family network, through the same cousin threads and church connections that had always carried information in both directions, and he felt no satisfaction in it, only a tired, heavy sorrow for 2 little girls who had done nothing wrong and were now navigating a world that their father had broken. Darius lost his marriage, his daughter's daily presence, his family's respect, and the easy social currency of his charm, which had always depended on nobody examining him too closely. Now everyone was examining him. The cookouts stopped, including him. The holiday invitations stopped coming. He became, in the language of the community, that had always been his safety net, someone people didn't really want around anymore. He called Cedric once, 3 months after the divorce was finalized. Cedric looked at the name on the screen for a long time. Then he declined the call and blocked the number. There was nothing Darius could say that Cedric needed to hear. Simone relocated. Not immediately, she stayed in Atlanta for several months in an apartment across town, navigating her new circumstances with the same surface composure she had always maintained. But the city had become for her a place where too many people knew too much. The family who had once been her social world had reorganized itself quietly but permanently. Her parents did not stop loving her, they were her parents, but something had changed between them that neither distance nor time fully repaired. Her father Howard called Cedric once and simply said, "I am sorry, son. I am deeply sorry." He did not explain further. He did not need to. Janelle reached out to Cedric 3 weeks after the dinner. She sent a text first, "Can I call you?" And when he said yes, she talked for a long time. She told him that she had always had a feeling of persistent discomfort she could never fully name about the particular way Simone operated. She told him that she had loved her sister her whole life, and still did, but that love and endorsement were not the same thing. She said she was always like this Cedric. Even as a little girl, she was always calculating something. "I just never thought she would do it to you." And then after a pause, "You deserved better. From the very beginning, you deserved better." Cedric thanked her. He meant it. On the day the divorce was finalized, a Thursday in late February, gray and cold, the kind of Atlanta winter day that felt like the city was holding its breath, Cedric sat in Wendell's office and signed the last document and handed it back across the desk. Wendell looked at him for a moment. Then he said, "What are you going to do now?" Cedric thought about it. He thought about the $42,000 still sitting in his savings account, untouched, still intact. He thought about the senior structural engineer position his firm had offered him 2 weeks ago. He thought about a small house 3 miles from the neighborhood where he had grown up, that he had seen listed online with a front porch and a driveway and a yard with enough room for a garden. "I'm going to buy a house," Cedric said. Wendell smiled. "Good." The keys came through on a Friday. Cedric drove to the new house alone and sat on the front steps for a long time in the thin winter sunlight. His coat zipped up his hands, wrapped around a cup of coffee from the shop 2 blocks away. He was not sad. He was not angry. He was not the destroyed man he might have been if the truth had stayed hidden, if he had signed that document, if Miss Opal had not kept her small spiral notebook. He was just beginning. And beginning, he had learned, was the bravest thing a person could do. 6 months after the divorce was finalized, Cedric Lawson's life looked nothing like the one he had almost been trapped inside. The house was small, 3 bedrooms, 1.5 bathrooms, a front porch, wide enough for 2 chairs, and a small table, a backyard, with a patch of actual grass that he had mowed himself 3 times already and felt unreasonably proud of every time. It was not the house he had once imagined sharing with Simone. It was better than that house in the way that things you choose entirely for yourself are always better, quieter, more honest, more completely yours. He had painted the living room a deep, warm gray on a Saturday in March, with his mother Ruth Ann beside him, both of them in old clothes, an argument about the correct ratio of music to silence for painting purposes going on the entire time. Ruth Ann had won. There had been a lot of Stevie Wonder. He had put a chair on the front porch. Just one for now. He was not in a hurry. His firm had given him the senior structural engineer title, and with it, a project he genuinely loved, the structural assessment and renovation planning, for 3 historic buildings in the old Fourth Ward neighborhood buildings that had stood for over 100 years and needed someone to understand what was still strong in them and what needed to be carefully, respectfully rebuilt. He went to work every morning with the particular energy of a man who has been reminded recently and forcefully of what it feels like to do work that matters. His colleagues noticed the change in him. One of them, a younger engineer named Broderick, told him one afternoon, "You seem different from when you left for Germany. More settled." Cedric thought about that for a moment. "I know what I'm building now," he said. "And I know what I'm not." Broderick nodded, like that made complete sense, which it did. Miss Opal came to the housewarming. It was a small gathering. Ruth Ann Wendell and his wife, a few old friends, Janelle, who had become quietly and genuinely someone Cedric considered a real friend. Miss Opal arrived in her lavender dress, the good one, the one she had worn to his wedding years ago. She stood in the middle of his living room and looked around at the warm gray walls and the new furniture and the light coming through the front windows, and she said, "This is right. This feels right." Cedric had framed one of her marigolds. She had cut one from her garden and pressed it herself and given it to him when he got the keys, folded in a piece of paper on which she had written simply, "New beginnings deserve new flowers." It hung in the hallway near the front door, small and golden and exact. Every weekend, without exception, Cedric mowed Miss Opal's lawn. He brought her groceries on Thursdays. He sat on her porch on Sunday evenings, and they talked about everything and nothing the way neighbors do when they have known each other long enough to be comfortable with silence. He had introduced her to his colleagues as his neighborhood grandmother, and she had accepted the title with the dignified pleasure of someone who had earned something real. He had come to understand the reason he still had his life intact. Not just the evidence she had kept, though, that had been everything, but the simple, stubborn, costly act of paying attention when it would have been much easier to look away. She had chosen truth over comfort. She had chosen him over convenience. There were not enough Sunday evenings on enough front porches to fully repay that. But he was going to spend a good long while trying. Simone had moved to Charlotte, the last Cedric heard through the peripheral information that filters through family networks. Whether you seek it or not, she was managing on her own with the baby, a boy born in late spring. Darius sent money inconsistently. Her parents visited when they could. Cedric wished the child no harm. The child had done nothing wrong and deserved every good thing. He wished Simone no harm either, if he was being fully honest with himself. What he wished her was what he wished everyone who had ever operated the way she operated, the particular education that comes from finally facing the full weight of your own choices with no one left to absorb them for you. He hoped it was teaching her something. He did not spend much time thinking about it. He opened his journal on a quiet Tuesday evening, a new journal, dark blue cover. The first entry dated the day he got his house keys, and he read the single line he had written on that first day. "I almost let love make me sign away my whole life. Never again." He looked at it for a long time. Then he turned to a fresh page and wrote something new. "The house is good. The work is good. The porch has one chair, and it is enough." He closed the journal. Outside, the Atlanta evening was warm, and the fireflies were just beginning to come out over the yard, small lights appearing and disappearing, in the dark, unhurried, doing exactly what they were made to do. Cedric sat and watched them for a while, just breathing, just present, just beginning still, the way a person is always beginning as long as they are paying attention and telling themselves the truth. Some people mistake devotion for weakness. They see a loving heart and decide it is something that can be managed, leveraged, and quietly used up. They see a person who shows up, who works, who sacrifices, who loves without conditions, and they calculate what that love can be made to provide. But devotion is not weakness. Devotion, real devotion, is the most clarifying force in the world because it does not disappear when it is betrayed. It transforms. It becomes discernment. It becomes the knowledge of exactly who deserves to be in your life and who has been taking up space that belongs to something better. If you have loved someone with everything you had and been handed back deception in return, hear this: that capacity in you is not a flaw. It is not something to harden or abandon. It is something to protect. And the first person you owe that protection to is yourself. If this story moved you, if you found yourself nodding or crying or feeling something you needed to feel, leave a comment right now and tell me where you are watching from and what time it is where you are. I want to know who is in this room with me tonight. This community is built on stories that are real and emotions that matter, and the knowledge that none of us are walking through the hard things alone. If you are new here, welcome home. Hit that subscribe button so you never miss a story like this one. And if you have been here for a while, you already know what to do. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. I will see you in the next one.